All right, so the question is being asked all over the place. Do you think the state of Israel should exist? Right, so it's like a gotcha question, as if to say, if you say yes or no to that, you're somehow, I don't know, whatever slur they want to make about you. So it's a weird question. Should Israel exist or should the state of Israel exist? Either way, it's asked. Well, of course it should exist. It's a geological piece of land. What you're going to call it is a different story. However, the state of Israel, according to the Israelis, and according to everyone a lot of other people around the world, is a democracy. So are you asking, should that piece of land, that region, have a democracy on it? Or are you asking it, should it be a religious state? I don't agree with it being a religious state. I'm not really for that. It should be a democracy. Whether it is or not is a long debate. Depends what you mean by that. There's no real democracy in the world now. It's being taken over by corporations everywhere. Corporations rule the world because of human greed, and that's it. So every man has their price, and all that leads to corporations ruling the world, giant corporations. So we're in a kind of giant corporation feudalist state now, where there's the uber lords, the super rich. Super rich is not a big enough word for it, in my opinion. It's like beyond that. Super rich, and people working in dead end jobs with no career prospects and barely able to make ends meet. So you all know that story, and the different arguments around that. It's always been this two-party system, whether that's in America or in the UK, where I'm from. So it's just, I don't know, it's just like locked into these two-party duopoly that don't really rock the boat too much, especially these days, right? So it's basically a corporate entity, an entity for the corporations. So you go back to, should Israel exist? Well, democracy should exist. Unfortunately, Israel is very much tied into the corporate, political, news, media, industrial complex around the world, especially the Western world, America. So it's very much sort of in the web of that. It's not a separate entity. So there's another question. Should the corporate, media, political, industrial complex, which feeds on itself to give those who are more beneficial to that system to rise to the top and make something of it, and causes a lot of destruction around the world. And so, and is a sort of it's going to turn into some kind of zombie system which just rules over everybody, without even the people involved in it having much benefit from it, except the super rich. The super rich will in fact be affected as well. That's something else, a whole nother story. They're not going to be able to escape to some beautiful island to get away from the mayhem that will come if there's not more general equality. I don't mean communism. I mean a general sense, this idea that the highest paid person in society should not be paid more than a certain amount, more than the lowest paid, now whatever that amount is, or that the richest person in society should not be a certain amount, let's say 100 times richer than the lowest person, whatever that figure people want to put up. And I kind of agree with that, because we are sort of one world family. I believe we're a one world family. We're a family. And families, in a family, there's different people, different older brothers making money. There's uncles, there's father, mother, having a job, whatever it is. And maybe even the kids are entrepreneurial and make a bit of money doing a part-time job. And somewhere, once I know what the age limit for that is, but so it's everybody's at a different level. There's no there's no communism in a family, right? You think about a family, there's no real communism there. It's not like everybody's on the same level. Hey, mummy, I want to go and spend all the money on cookies and chocolates and all that spare money, and you give me 1/5. Let's say it's a family of 5. Give me 1/5 of it, and I'll go spend it on chocolates, like I used to do when I was a kid. So. So it's not like that. The kid gets pocket money, nothing like on the level the adults get, or even the elder teenagers. So that's a family. It's one world family. It's, there's limits, but there shouldn't be like massive, like the kids shouldn't be starving while everyone else, all the adults, are eating. So that's an analogy for the world. We're all one world family, and therefore there shouldn't be these wide gaps between the rich and poor, and powerful and less powerful, or people with no power. So you have to have some kind of democracy, let's just put it there. And with Israel, I'll take it at face value that people say it's a democracy. I think it's got all sorts of issues that are not very democratic. However, let's just take it as a democracy. Yes, a democracy should exist. What you call it is different. Should Israel exist? What does that mean? That's almost like saying, should a Jewish state exist? Because I don't know why you would just say that. Should England exist? Of course. Now, should it exist as like a fascist state, like fascist Germany in the 1930s and 40s? Should it exist like that? So if it became like that, which parts of it are, by the way, if you think about it. However, it's still a pretty free place to live, I suppose. So should England exist? Well, yeah, if it's a democracy. If it's not a democracy, it's a fascist system and, a fiefdom and a feudal system, or whatever you want to call it, aristocracy, telling everybody else what to do, some kind of dictatorship and a slave-master relationship, then no, it probably shouldn't exist, right? So slavery, a slave system, shouldn't exist. So if England became like that, then I would say no, it shouldn't exist, the slave system. You can keep calling it England, but it's not England anymore, is it? Now, that's not an analogy to Israel. Israel's not like that. It's a democracy, but it's just an analogy to say it doesn't matter what it's called, it's what it does that counts. And so you could technically, if you're a creative person and not too crazy in your head, change the name. So if everything stays the same, let me ask you a question. If everything stayed exactly the same as it is, this democracy, and this is for people who are pro-Israel right now, because I know the pro-Palestinian people will say, no, it shouldn't be like that, or it should change dramatically. But let's say the people who think Israel should just be the way it is, let's say before this October uprising, or years before when I was there in 1986, hitchhiking around Israel. There were no fences, there were no walls. I got rides or lifts. I live in America, so it's rides in America. I got rides from all sorts of people, all religions, who were all very kind to me, gracious and helpful, all the way. One of the most wonderful experiences of my life. And I was hitchhiking on my own through the night from Jericho to Galilee, Sea of Galilee, for one thing. So just got absolute support from everybody. Slept under the stars on top of the Masada, if you know what that is. That's a whole history there. Watched the full moon come up over Jordan, and watched the sun come up the next day over Jordan. You can see Jordan from there over the Dead Sea. So yeah, it's the most wonderful place. No fences, no barriers. There was some tension, but nothing. It looked like it was going to be a successful state the way it was then. There was no West Bank. There was a place called West Bank, but it's more of a county than anything else, as far as I know. There definitely wasn't a fence, and there wasn't a Gaza. There were no fences or walls. Wide open, Gaza, Israel, what's called Palestine, West Bank, was all one country. So we should go back to that and go back to peace, because it was peaceful and a free place, and a very beautiful place back then. It had so much potential for so much, just a beautiful state, country to evolve into what could have been great, but it's evolved into something very, I don't know if I think it might be a failed state at this point with what's happened this week, these last couple of weeks especially, but it was a bit like that anyway. It's going in that direction for various reasons, complex reasons, not simplistic. A lot of things you were told in the war, that this so-called war, this uprising of the last couple of weeks were lies, a lot of lies and propaganda being thrown around just like in Ukraine. Endless, just anything that will put one tribe against another, these tribal, mental, hystericist, herd mentality, tribalists, football fan mentality, I call it. So anything that will get at those football fans fighting each other goes out there, boom, as soon as a war starts, all the time, every time. Babies being thrown out of incubators, 40 babies thrown out of incubators in Kuwait by Iraqi soldiers, when Iraq went into Kuwait in 1990, 40 babies thrown out of incubators. Didn't happen. Iraqi soldiers raping everybody. But it didn't happen. It's just a lie. And the same with this whole thing, Russia raping all these people. Yeah, there's a few bad apples in every military. Some of them are mercenaries that go over to war specifically for that purpose. So others are just mercenaries and end up doing it because they're a bit mental anyway. Others are so-called volunteers from the West in Ukraine, for example. I'm sure those were just gamer boys, playing video games that thought they were superheroes and hightailed it back pretty quickly when confronted with real war. But the lies and propaganda are through the roof always. And so we're not going to get into that here. There's a lot of instances I could go over. There were not 40 babies with their heads chopped off. That was a lie made up by one guy, spread around the world in Israel last week, a couple of weeks ago. So that didn't happen. Okay, but there were 40 babies killed? Probably not. No, there wasn't. You don't have any proof of that. And then, some people of all ages got killed in the crossfire. I'm not getting into that because that's a long topic, and you're being brainwashed if you think Hamas and Islam wants to wipe Jews off the face of the earth. It's just nonsense, childish, stupid, infantilized thinking. It's like children walking around all over the place, squabbling with each other. That does not exist. And if you read the Hamas charter, it's very clear they're not against Jews or Judaism. Read the updated 2017 Hamas charter. Right, very, very, very clear. What they're against is the system. And so that system is a system which most Israelis seem to like, and a lot of people around the world think it's a good democratic system. Should that exist? If it's a good system, yes, it should. If it's a good democratic system for everyone and works for everyone, of course it should. If it turns into, I'm not saying it is right now, but let's say it turned into like a fascist mono-religion, slave state or something like that, absolute dictatorship and horrible Stalin-esque type of country, which it's not going to, but let's just say it did, would you then say the state of Israel should exist? If it's still called the state of Israel, would you then say it should exist? I don't know. It's a bit like saying, should Nazi in the 1930s and 40s, saying, should Nazi Germany exist? No, it shouldn't. So, but you wouldn't say, should Germany exist? Yeah, of course Germany should exist. It's a place. It's not, it's geological land. You can't just get rid of it. You can call it something else, which is my point here. The problem with Israel, the word, is it has all these connotations, and people can't extract in their minds what that means. Many people on both sides of this whole argument think it means, or this whole situation here, they think Israel, it means Jewish state. Mainstream media have gone around calling Israel a Jewish state here and there, not that often, but they do. And so it's not a Jewish state, it's a democracy, is it or isn't it? Make up your mind. Because if it's a democracy, then Israel does not stand for Jews, the word. It stands for a democratic country. And of course it should exist. So it's just such a stupid, manipulative question. And here, that's my answer. But if you change the name of it, could you? But it stayed exactly the same. If for those who think the system is great before this insurrection, so for those who thought the system was good system for considering the situation for the last 10, 20 years, whatever it is, or back in 1986, that if you thought the system is good, democratic, fair, relatively fair system, because no democracy is perfectly fair, but relatively fair overall sort of democracy. Well, if it stayed exactly like that, everything stayed exactly the same. Remember that. Everything stayed exactly the same, but you changed the name to some other name, like, I don't know. I don't know what a non-controversial name would be. The Levant, perhaps, or just call it Peace Country. Right. So then you ask, should peace country exist? Well, if it's a democracy, if it's not a democracy, if it's dictatorship or a cult, no, it shouldn't exist. But if it's a democracy, as people say Israel is, of course it should exist. It's not even a question. It's a bizarre question, because it is like you are saying, using that question as a gotcha question. It's almost like saying, do you want to kill off Jews or something? It's not Jews. It's a democracy. Now, it's much worse than it was when I was there, because it's all split up into these different regions, Gaza, Palestine, places like that. So it's just a mess, in my opinion. But it would have been better to stay as one country called Israel. So do I think Israel should exist? Yes, we should go back to 1986, when it was all one country. So the powers that be in this sort of a connection into and web, or intertwined with the military-industrial political complex, media, news media, you can never leave that out of there. Corporate complex, corporations rule the world. And then, of course, the oil fields and the rest of that region, that all plays a part in this, all of it. So that system is not working for many people. That's what they're saying, okay? Hamas, Gazans, Palestinians, they say it doesn't really work for them. So they're against the system. And Hamas has made that really clear, that it's not the country. Should Israel be wiped off the map? Well, again, just change the name. Why not? Israel is a tribe. It's a bit weird. So a tribe, it would be a bit weird to call a country after the name of a tribe, because it all has all this good and bad, or positive and negative history to it. Depends what you're looking at, but there's all sorts of things mixed up with the tribal history that goes back a long way, thousands of years even. So it's named after a tribe, which is sectarian. Should you have a country that's named from a sectarian point of view, or it's a sectarian name? The word Israel, unfortunately, is sectarian, and so change the name. If everything else stays the same, you could change the name and you'd be perfectly happy. If you think Israel is great as is, or has been until this last couple of weeks, if you think that, then you would be perfectly happy if they changed the name, if nothing else changed, right? Everyone else was happy with it. All the Israelis, everyone said, yeah, change the name, the Levant, or Peace Country. But everything else stayed the same. You'd be happy with it. So, and everyone would be happy if you think the system's good, but it's not. It's systemically broken, because it's fixed into, or filtered into, and tied into this whole worldwide Western-dominated massive military, industrial, political, corporate complex, news media, all of that intertwined to make a big, giant mess of ignorance, building upon ignorance to utter stupidity as the end result. We're in an era of the collapse of the age of ignorance. So you're seeing this disintegration of what we thought was society. So it will come together in a different way. We don't really know yet, but it's probably going to be who knows. It won't be the same if it does come back together in some reformed system across the world. And it won't be the globalists. It's going to be, I don't know, it's just going to be much more natural, let's just put it that way, rather than a sort of military, industrial, corporate news media complex, dominating everything to the point where they were able to use it to coerce the whole system, the corporate system, to coerce and damage and hurt and oppress your own people. During COVID, during lockdowns, during the vaccine mandates, during Ukraine, people were oppressed. Now it's worse. With this thing, it's worse. There's people calling for, on either side, calling for, the arrest or cancellation of people on the other side. It's almost more vehement than the whole vaccine lockdown hysteria. And that's because they've been brain damaged. PTSD, as I predicted long ago, would happen due to all this hysteria over a stunningly weak virus with a 0.2% infection fatality rate. Right? It's a less deadly than an average flu. We just have the biggest elderly population in history, both by percentage of population worldwide and in each country, and by percentage, but also just by number. There's 55 million people in America over the age of 65, right? So if I sound like I'm just a bit bored saying this, because I'm bored saying it, but think about it, 55 million people over the age of 65. Most deaths from COVID were in the elderly. Most deaths were with COVID, not of COVID. But even if you count them all as COVID deaths, there was, 1 million, and most of them were in the elderly. So that's 1 million from 55 million. You look at the world, there's 800 million people over the age of 65 in the world. 800 million. 7 million died worldwide. If you want to be really, really extreme and call it 10 million, it's still nothing. Most of them elderly. Tiny amount among the 800 million people over the age of 65 on the planet. I've made this point time and time again. I'm right, you're wrong. Right? Everyone else is wrong. It doesn't matter where this virus came from, lab leak, who cares? It's a stunningly weak virus. You just don't understand your demographics. That's all. That's all that was. So that created this mass hysteria, PTSD. So when Ukraine came along, there was this whole hysteria came up again. Irrational thinking, inability to look at facts on the ground, and just football fan mentality, herd mentality. Same with this. It's gotten worse. It's ironic that a lot of people who were in those different camps for COVID, or maybe in the same camp for COVID, or the same camp for Ukraine, maybe they split up a bit there because they had different opinions on that. Now they have completely different opinions. Those two camps have different opinions on this Israeli-Hamas conflict, and they're all losing friends and losing contacts and losing associates because they're so vehemently one-sided or the other. Herd mentality, football fan mentality, mental illness. So, and I know it takes one to know one, right? But it is throughout society, and it's a disaster. It's not coming back together in any time soon without other things I could talk about that can cause that. But should Israel exist? Of course it should. Call it whatever you want, though. If I said, should it all exist exactly the same? Let's say I said, yes, it should exist, which I believe it should. It should exist the way it was in 1986 when I was hitchhiking around Israel, right? West Bank, the lot of it, right? What is now Palestine. There was no walls, there were no fences, there's no wall around Gaza, none of that. So, should that exist, that country I was in? Yes, it should definitely exist. But nowadays, it's just a mess. It seems like it might be a failed state, just like Ukraine will be. So, it's a disaster. But if we say, should that country that I was in 1986 exist? Yes, I think that country, a country like that, should exist. It was a wonderful place. But call it whatever you want. If it's the same as what it was in 1986, it doesn't matter what the name is, unless you have a prejudice in your mind, whether on one side or the other. Israel, no, it shouldn't be called Israel because that's a tribal biblical thing that goes back and it's nothing to do with the real people of the place. It's more of a religious name of some sort, right? But if you're on the other side, yes, it should be called Israel because it's a tribal, historical, religious name of some sort that relates directly to the word Jews. You might be arguing for, yes, it should exist, but if it changes, into something horrible, dictatorship, should it exist? Well, you might say yes if it's beneficial to your state of mind, but I would say it doesn't matter what it's called, it should actually be changed, And I wish we'll never get back to 1986 when I was there. We'll never get back to that now. Anyway, it's a different world all over, so maybe it doesn't matter. But if we could go back to 1986 and have Israel as it was then, with its problems, obviously, but it was a much, much better country. Yes, go back to 1986 and give it a different name so that everyone's happy. Don't give it this sectarian name. It is a sectarian name, you have to admit that. Give it a different name. It was a mistake to call these names after a religion, these places, when it was split up. When was that? Or the British Mandate or anything like that. Or 1948 when it was split up. And, the history of that's all over the place, by the way. But when it became given different names, it was always, I'm not getting into the name thing of the ancient history, that's just way too big. But if it was 1986 and we gave it a different name, it would have been better because it's not a sectarian name. I don't know if the Levant is sectarian. If it is, it's a sort of, the Levant is a sort of British and French colonial name, something like that. So it's not their name, so it should probably be called something else. Let's say, just for want of a better phrase, just call it the peace country, right? If you called it that, and it really was a democracy, fair and free for everybody, trying as best any democracy can to make it good and peaceful and fair and free and safe for everybody, would you complain? Would you say, no, it should be called Israel at all costs? Why? So when someone says, should Israel exist? I'm like, if it doesn't matter, that's just a name. Call it the peace country. Rename the whole thing. Come back together as one people. Israelites or Jews and Arabs and Christians and atheists who populate that country, which we call Israel, now Palestine, Gaza. All of that one place called the peace country. Now, of course, it's never going to happen, but that's what I would call for, actually. And go back to 1986 and those attitudes back then, which were improving across the whole region, across the whole of Israel. We lost it. We lost it all. Now we've got this disaster. This will be almost impossible to fix. I don't know. I don't think Israel is going to do its ground offensive, because that will make everything worse and impossible to pull back from. So I predict there will be a kind of negotiations going on. The only way out now is to get the world involved, the United Nations, get Russia in, get America in, keep the UK out of it. Kind of stupid and annoying. That's my country. But just get the major bodies of the world in, China, to come and talk it through together with Hamas and the Palestinians. And don't forget, Hamas and the Israelis. Don't forget, Hamas has not called for the elimination of Jews or Judaism. It is not against Jews or Judaism. Go back to 1986. When I was there, one big country, relatively peaceful, and give it a different name instead of that sectarian name. So when someone asks me, do you think Israel should exist? I'm like, it's just a name. It should exist as a really good democracy, or a bit more like 1986, but improving all the time in those regards, a democracy of sorts. And you can give it a different name. It doesn't matter what it's called, but maybe this sectarian name, Israel, maybe the name should go, but everything else should stay the same as a peaceful democracy. And that's what we need. And I don't know how we achieve that. Nobody knows, but we will achieve it somehow. And so it will eventually, it might stay as a Palestine and Israel, and then Gaza's part of Palestine or something like that, but eventually it'll be more like the EU. People will just cross borders, and then those borders won't mean anything. So just go back to 1986 borders, go back to peace, go back to détente, go back to talking to each other, stop this stupid religious sectarian world, which we all have to watch from a distance. The demise of a place that I loved because of the people there when I went there who helped me so much. The demise of this place that was so beautiful back then. Go back to peace. Give it a different name, because that's a mad name. If you want to call it Israel, that's because you think Israel is an important word because it has some sectarian history to it. That is mad in the modern world, right? So there's all sorts of other issues with Israel and Palestine and all that. Would take a long time to go over, but I just wanted to address that one. Do you think the state of Israel should exist? Or do you think Israel should exist? Whatever's good about it should exist. Whatever's bad about it should not exist. But whatever's good about it should exist. It doesn't matter what it's called. It's just mad. And I do think, actually, having gone through this just now, I sort of realised, well, Israel, the word Israel is too sectarian. And the word Palestine would probably be too sort of sectarian. So just go for the Levant, or call it peace country in ancient Semitic. Find out what the word phrase for peace country would be if Abraham said it, right? Whatever, because they're both Abrahamic religions, whatever they call it. All of those are Christians, Jews, Muslims. So whatever the phrase Abraham would have used in the ancient Indo-European, which is not sectarian, whatever he would have used, or the people around him before he even came along, the phrase for peace country, maybe you call it that. But the Israel as a sectarian name probably should go. And that's what these people in Arabic countries and also Hamas, when they say Israel will be gone from the map, it's always interpreted by the West and the journalists. Ahmadinejad, president of Iran, about 10 to 15 years ago, said something along the lines of Israel will eventually fade from the map. But it was interpreted and told to everybody, Ahmadinejad of Iran says Israel should be wiped off the map. So everything was Iran says, Ahmadinejad, president of Iran, says, Prime Minister says, Israel should be wiped off the map, let's blow it up. No, he didn't say that. He said, over time, historically, the name will disappear, and what will be left is a democracy, which, of course, Iran's borderline democracy, I don't know, but some kind of a livable situation that's happy for everybody. Not Israel and Jews killed off. That's not what he meant. He meant it's inevitable that the sectarian name disappears over time. And if the state of Israel is highly biased and prejudiced, biased for Jews and prejudiced against Muslims and other people, if that's the case, I said if, then that will disappear over time, because that's not sustainable in a global world family. So change the name. I suggest you change the name, peace country, in ancient Indo-European language or something, and then it'll just live together. It's not unlikely to happen, but this name, should Israel be wiped off the face of the earth, wiped off the map, or should Israel exist, should the state of Israel exist, it doesn't matter what you call it. If it's a democracy, if it's fair, which people are saying it is, then it doesn't matter what the name is. Call it something else. It's not a Jewish state. It's not supposed to be. And if it is, then it should just change into a democratic state and called something else. That's my thinking. It's just a weird question. That's all I'm saying. It's just a really manipulative and a really dumb question. So don't ask me that question. You'll just get this video shoved in your face. Bye.